I don't feel so good, Kamala sisters. Is that an expanded Trump map I feel coming on? We are now 1 week away from the actual election day. It's unfortunate in America it's becoming like election month because in a lot of states, most of the voting is going to be over even before election day, which personally I don't like. I like the tradition of going on a single day. More people I know than ever are voting early this cycle, and I refuse to give in. I'm not going to do it. To me, election day is 1 day. That's the day you vote. And if you can't make it, oh well, that's your problem. But the early vote in many states, but particularly in Florida, that's what I'm familiar with. This is kind of the state that I know the most about, even though it's not in play this cycle. I think it can still be interesting to look at and compare to past cycles to see just how much better Trump is doing. Because I don't think that, if Trump is doing, let's say, 5 points better in Florida than he did in 2020, I don't think that exists in a vacuum. I don't think that Florida just gets 5% more red in 4 years and the rest of the country doesn't move. I'm not saying that it's a one-for-one conversion, let's say. If Florida is significantly more pro-Trump now than it was in 2020, I'm not saying that Wisconsin will be equally more pro-Trump. I'm not saying that Nevada will be equally more pro-Trump. I'm not saying that Georgia will be equally more pro-Trump. All I'm saying is that, to me, this means something. And for some reason, I can't find great, easily refreshed early voting results, with party ID for other states. Part of the reason for that is that a lot of states people don't register by party. They don't have it. It's not on their voter registration. But anyway, in Florida, we have good data. We have everybody registers as either, some third party, Republican, Democrat, or just no party affiliation, which is what we call independents. And so as people vote early, and return their mail-in ballots if they requested them, we know the party breakdown of those voters. And right now in Florida, we're sitting at about 45% Republican, 33% Democrat, and then 19 or 20% other, which is pretty unprecedented in a presidential election. In Florida traditionally, in the early and mail-in vote, the Democrats would take a lead by a party affiliation. Now, we don't know how these people voted, but I'm saying in terms of registration, registered Democrats would vote more early, and then the Republicans would just have to have a massive election day turnout, in order to overwhelm that. And it's so similar in so many states. We have seen this consistently over the past few cycles. That has been the pattern in American elections. And right now, in states like Florida, Arizona, even now Nevada, Republicans are ahead in terms of early vote. And so the question has become, are the Republicans just cannibalizing their election day votes? Are the Democrats going to just surge on election day, and we're just going to be the exact opposite, the total 180-degree inversion of 2020, in which all the Democrats voted early, and then all the Republicans voted election day? And so there's a lot of people who have been talking about this constantly, ad nauseum, trying to analyze this. There have been pollsters who have been polling this, who've had some, interesting results. But again, at the end of the day, those are just polls. And so we don't know for sure until election day rolls around. But you could call it normalcy bias. But at the end of the day, when I look at this, I don't think that things just flip 180 like that overnight. I don't think that all of a sudden Republicans are just going to not show up on election day. I don't think that less Democrats are choosing to vote early in favor of voting on election day. That doesn't make sense to me. There has not been a push from the Democratic Party to tell their voters, hey, stay home until election day. Okay, we don't want you voting early. They say the opposite. Both parties say the opposite. They want people to vote early just so they can get it out of the way, so that they can get those votes banked. It makes it easier for them in terms of their get-out-the-vote efforts on election day itself. The more registered voters you have, likely voters, who have not yet voted by Election Day. That's more people that you have to mobilize to try and knock on doors, to try and contact them, to try and call them on the phone and say, hey, please go vote today. And so that's why I see this as a problem for Democrats, because this is not by design. The Democrats would not intentionally engineer this. And again, even if they had, or even if they did want to do that, there's no evidence of that. You've not seen Kamala out trying to communicate to her voters, hey, everybody, let's wait until Election Day to vote so that we can surprise the GOP. They're not doing that. And so there is no reason why systemically this would be going on. Why all the Democrats, independently, without any sort of central motivating force, would just decide in their heads, without telling anyone, hey, we're all going to wait until Election Day to vote. And so if less Democrats all of a sudden are showing up to vote early, to me, that just signals less Democrats are voting this year. I think it's that simple. Yes, it's possible that is wrong. It is possible the Democrat turnout is just as high as it was in 2020. But we're not seeing that. Or I should say just as high relative to Republican turnout, put it that way. Because I don't know what the final turnout numbers will be. But on a relative basis, clearly the Republicans have the advantage. We're at right now in Florida with the early vote, the electorate is like R plus 12. That's insane. Just a few years ago, we would have D plus electorates, meaning more Democrats by party ID voting in Florida elections than Republicans. Now, Republicans outnumber Democrats in the electorate in terms of people who voted by about 12% so far, and that's only going to rise, in my opinion, on Election Day. And so there are some polls that, there's compare it, cycle to cycle. But these polls where they're asking people, hey, how do you plan to vote this year? Do you plan to vote? Have you voted already? Do you plan to vote on Election Day? Do you plan to vote early? Or do you just think you probably won't vote? That's sort of a thing, a question that's down in the questionnaire. It's not the top line item of, hey, who do you support for president? That's not really something that you could aggregate very well. It's too specific. And so the couple that I've looked at still seem to indicate the Kamala voters, by and large, favor voting early over voting on Election Day. And so we should expect that most of the Democratic turnout is going to be banked before the election. That is until they start counting all of the mail-in ballots that somehow just arrive in the mail after the election that magically have no postmark on them. The mail-in ballots that could have come from anywhere and had been sent at any time, filled out by anyone. That's the wild card that the Democrats have up their sleeve, which they apparently, as of right now, will be allowed to play in Nevada. But thankfully, Nevada is not going to be a crucial state. Nevada is not going to be like the turning point that decides this election. And while I hope that is changed, that court ruling is overturned in Nevada, it's not the end of the world if Nevada can be fortified, let's say. We all know what election fortification means. So I'll leave it at that. But anyway, from the few polls that I've seen that have tried to measure this, it still seems, Republicans generally favor Election Day voting, and Democrats generally favor early voting. And so if Republicans are outperforming Democrats in terms of turnout in early voting, we should expect that pattern to carry through to Election Day, meaning the disparity in turnout should only increase. We're not going to see the Democrats narrow that gap in turnout. So, if the turnout in Florida for early voting right now is R plus 12, you're not going to see that shrink to like R plus 6 after the Election Day votes come in. So, with that said, where do we stand in terms of the Electoral College as of right now? Well, as far as the swing states go, Trump seems to be doing quite well in the Sun Belt states. Those kind of seem to be kind of locked in at this point. The Harris campaign seems to be de-emphasizing them. They canceled a big ad buy in North Carolina that has being reported here and there. People just noticed. I think because that kind of stuff is publicly has to be publicly declared. So they pulled money out of North Carolina. They're essentially ceding that to Trump. In Arizona, the GOP has an early vote lead of around 100,000 ballots. I guess the cope is that those are all like McCain Republicans, and they're all going to vote for Kamala Harris. I guess you can say that. That's possible. I would think that that's not probable. I wouldn't feel too confident if I were a Democrat. And Nevada, which, of course, pending this potential fortification matter, right now they have an R plus 40,000 advantage, which has never happened kind of in a presidential race. The Republicans, in terms of early vote, are never ahead. And as I've discussed before, Nevada, the last two elections, been trending in Trump's way. Would be pretty surprising if it doesn't finally end up in his column this cycle. Georgia, even though we don't have party ID for early voting, I would expect it to be about around where Arizona is. And, Jacksonville, Florida, which tends to be, culturally, if you've ever been to Jacksonville and South Georgia and stuff, they've got some similarities, and it's been pointed out that there is the correlation between how Duval County, which is where Jacksonville is, votes, and how Georgia as a state kind of votes. They both kind of move in similar ways. They're culturally similar. And Trump, of course, is doing much better there than he was 4 years ago. And so you would tend to think, hey, that's going to translate to Georgia somewhat. It was razor thin in Georgia officially, by the official count last time. So I don't think it's much of a stretch, given the trends that we're seeing in other states, for Georgia to flip back in Trump's column. So I feel fairly confident about those four: North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada. And so that should put Trump at like 268 electoral votes. That I think is basically his floor. And so, as I've discussed before, at that point, then he just needs to pick off one of the three Rust Belt swing states in order to get over 270. In fact, you could take Nevada out of Trump's column, and he would still only need one of those three Rust Belt swing states. There's a lot of talk right now about Trump expanding the map, trying to compete for Virginia, New Mexico, New Hampshire, Maine. He doesn't need any of those. If he wins those states, you know what? That'll be gravy. It's not going to decide who's the president. It's just going to be another feather in Trump's cap. And so at this stage, I look at the three Rust Belt swing states, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and it seems pretty clear to most people, based not only on polling trends, whatnot, party registration shifts in these states, that the odds of Trump winning at least one of them are extremely high. The odds of Harris being able to hang on and carry all three of them rather low. And after all, these states generally all vote together since they're so close. It hasn't been since '88 that they voted differently from each other. But of course, it's possible. I mean, that's just sort of a coincidence that they've all voted together. I mean, it's not total coincidence. There are demographic reasons. There are similarities between these states, but they are different places. They are physically different, and there are different people in each of these three states. And so even if they're close, it is conceivable that one goes that at least one goes to Trump and that Harris hung on to two, or if Trump only won two of them, Harris won one of them. This is perfectly feasible. It's perfectly reasonable. And in any of those scenarios, she's screwed. So at this point, I don't see any likely path for her. My assessment has not really changed at all since last week. I mean, the early vote data that we've been getting in Florida just has reinforced everything that I've been, feeling about, the election in general. I can't look at the numbers in the other states and judge them as intelligently, but when I look at Florida and I see the shifts here, I can see how much things have moved. And so I'm not going to try and directly extrapolate that into point values for other states. But all I can say is that Trump is by far more popular now than he ever has been. He's going to do better than he did in 2016 in terms of the popular vote at the very least. But I don't see how that doesn't translate into the Electoral College. As we all know, Republicans have routinely been able to win the Electoral College and lose the popular vote. And so if Trump is now more popular than ever, I really don't see how he doesn't score the greatest Electoral College win of his career. There's not too many people who have run in 3 presidential elections. Usually, if they make it to the nomination phase, they end up being a major party nominee. They stand for 1 or 2 elections, not 3. And so I still think that 312 electoral votes is the most likely outcome. Could be more than that. Could be less. It's possible that it's less. But 312 is still bang on. So anyway, with that said, I'll see you folks back here in the next one.